If you come to my house, you'll find Chick-fil-A bags all over the floor, but you're not going to find any classified information.
No comment on South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham's Chick-fil-A bag disclosure today. But if recent history is a guide, the senator might want to double-check his house for any classified information. Here was former Vice President Mike Pence in November.
Let me ask you, as we sit here in your home office in Indiana, did you take any classified documents with you from the White House?
I did not.
Do you see any reason for anyone to take classified documents with them leaving the White House?
Well, there'd be no reason to have classified documents, particularly if they were in an unprotected area.
Today we got the news that last week a lawyer for former Vice President Pence found about a dozen documents marked as classified in Pence's Indiana home. The same home where just months earlier he gave that interview saying he did not take any classified documents with him from the White House. But as much as this is a story about former Vice President Mike Pence, it is also a story about the system our government uses to keep classified information safe and how clearly part of that system is failing. It seems like it's just far too easy to leave the White House with classified documents, and that is, yes, a potentially huge national security risk. Here was the reaction of the chair and the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee this afternoon.
Were you surprised when you heard that the former Vice President Mike Pence also had classified documents in his possession, apparently?
Well, I kind of thought, holy heck. And I do wonder, how many other formers.
About the Mike Pence classified documents, I'm just wondering what your reaction was when you heard that news.
What the hell's going on around here is my reaction.
So that's a problem. That is a part of our government that needs to be examined and fixed. And that is one part of the story. The other part of the story is political. Here's former Vice President Pence earlier this month.
I think the Biden papers should be dealt with precisely the same way that President Trump's papers have been dealt with and examined with the same thoroughness and carefulness.
But would you acknowledge these aren't equal episodes?
I would say, Bob, they're different in degree, but not in kind.
Republicans have spent weeks trying to paint the Biden document story as identical to the Trump document story. Pence even put his emphasis on these incidents not being different in kind. But the emphasis here, from what we know at this point, is that they are extremely different in degree. Joining us now is Bradley Moss, a national security attorney who has represented federal officials, members of the military, and defense contractors in security clearance proceedings. Mr. Moss, thank you for joining us tonight. You may have classified documents. I may have some that I don't know about. That's highly, highly unlikely, but never say never, right? And the point would be, A, we got to shore up the ways in which we retain, classified documents. But B, it still doesn't resolve the very thorny legal problem former President Trump seems to have, right? Like, these are apples and that's a banana or an orange or whatever fruit metaphor you choose. Can you talk to me about how you see the Trump, Biden, Pence situations as both similar and different?
Sure. So we have the larger problem, which I think everyone, now that we have not just Donald Trump, who we know was chaotic in his handling of records, but we have President Biden, we have former Vice President Pence. Lord knows, maybe we'll find out former President Obama has something out in his place in Chicago. Who knows what else we'll find in former President Clinton's private residences. We have a problem here. There is a serious spillage issue in terms of these former constitutional officers. When they depart and staff boxes things up, things are getting slipped in, presumably inadvertently, but they're getting slipped in with all these various other records, and they're never supposed to have been there. They were never supposed to be in Mar-a-Lago. They never should have been at President Biden's locations, and they never should have been at Vice President Pence's house in Indiana. That's the larger system-wide issue that we have a breakdown here. The more specific issue of legality is we have two different paths. We've got what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump was told he had records, and he played games with the Justice Department. He obstructed. He was, argumentative. He ultimately had lawyers submit declaration that had false information in it. That's why he got raided in August. On the other hand, we have, at least so far, we have what President Biden and former Vice President Pence have done, which is a far more cooperative, please take these documents and get them the heck out of my house approach returning it the way they're supposed to. So that is the difference between the I don't want to get in any more trouble than I'm already in approach and the Donald Trump, I'm going to see how far I can push this approach. That's why Donald Trump is facing real potential criminal liability. And as far as I'm concerned, the other two are not.
Yeah, and I think that one of the problems here, at least in terms of the narrative, is that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, assigned a special prosecutor to the Biden case, which gives the veneer of equivalence to the Biden document retention and the Trump document retention. Does he now have to assign a special counsel to Vice President Pence? I mean, what do you think the threshold is at this point, given the asymmetry of what Biden did and what Trump did as far as classified documents? Is Pence going to be roped into all of this as well?
He might, but I don't think we're there yet. And here's why. Part of the reason there was a special counsel assigned for Donald Trump was because Donald Trump finally declared his third run for the presidency. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, the way Merrick Garland should be running this, he's got the FBI reviewing the documents. You have a U.S. Attorney's Office, someone obviously not in Indiana, assigned to review what the FBI's got. If Mike Pence decides to announce he's going to run for president, which we all assume he will do, if he does that, then you consider whether or not to appoint a special counsel in that same vein, in that same context as you did with Donald Trump and with President Biden. But you're not there yet, and you may never have to be, depending on what is determined by the FBI in its ongoing inquiry.
I mean, everybody gets a special counsel. It's like an Oprah giveaway. You get a special counsel and you get a special counsel. What about the larger systemic problem that you outlined at the beginning, Bradley? Like the way in which classified documents are retained or kept track of? I mean, how do you fix that problem? It sounds like, you know, first of all, a lot of these records are available electronically. So that puts less of a premium, perhaps, I don't know, you tell me, on the paper version. Is that how these things are getting lost? I mean, how do you look at this? And what's your assessment of what needs to be fixed?
So part of the problem is simply there's too much. There is too much classified data. It is an insurmountable problem to manage, to track, to properly secure. Spillage happens even with the most highly trained federal officials. Let's be really honest. It happens every day probably. But the greater problem here is that the individuals that we're talking about, these former constitutional officers, they don't get any training. They are elected. They don't get to go through security vetting. They're just granted access. So by virtue of their position, they're told, now you can see whatever you want. And they have no sense of what the proper procedures are. They have no sense and no accountability if they don't comply with them. So we have a real systemic issue, not only of how much we classify, but also how we train constitutional officers in how they're supposed to be handling this stuff and how serious they're supposed to treat potential mishandling of these records. And it may not be an easy solution. If I'm President Biden, this is your moment to take the offensive here. System-wide review. Figure out what the heck is going on here. Say, I've even gotten tripped up by this. I want a full review of the entire executive branch's policies on this, up to and including presidents and vice presidents, so we don't have this going forward.
Put a special counsel on it. I'm just kidding. Bradley Moss, national security attorney. Thank you for your time tonight. Great to talk with you as always.
Absolutely. Have a good one.